Well. Looks like we finally reached it. After the journey through the NES era of Final Fantasy came to a close with 3, we are now moving on to what many people consider to be the absolute golden era of Final Fantasy titles. The games that became some of the most well-known and beloved titles in all of the Square Enix library. And no game is better to start this off with Final Fantasy IV. Now, unlike pretty much every other Final Fantasy game I've played on this channel, I have actually had way more experience with Final Fantasy IV. I owned and played the GBA version a lot when I was a kid, even beating it, making it the first ever Final Fantasy I had beaten. Though, I don't remember a whole lot from it, mainly because I was a dumb kid that just kind of beat it and was like, alright, on to the next shiny game title. Now that I'm older and have a YouTube channel I get to talk about cool games with you all, I can now review the game and talk about all of its highs and a few of its lows. Welcome to my review of Final Fantasy IV and how it mishandles death. So, in order to kick things off for this review, how about we just do the usual and talk about just how nice Final Fantasy IV looks in the graphical area. Now, I played the PSP remake of 4 for this review. To be honest, I was originally going to play the GBA version of 4, due to nostalgia and me growing up playing that version. But I also reviewed both Final Fantasy 1 and 2's PSP remakes. So I decided to just wrap up the trilogy with this one. 4 has pretty much all of the strengths that 1 and 2 remakes had cranked up to 11. Character models, enemy designs, and of course, some dungeons and bosses. A personal favorite was actually the Tower of Babel, but the main thing that surprised me more than anything was how much they improved the 3D cutscenes in this one. Yeah, those were in 1 and to an extent 2, but this kind of blew my mind to just see how improved they were. They moved a lot smoother, they looked a lot better, and you could really just tell how much effort they put into this one in order to match 4's legacy. And as someone who grew up with 4, it was honestly kind of heartwarming to see it get this level of love with its remake. Also makes me kind of curious on how games like Final Fantasy 6 and 5 would have handled if they had gotten PSP remakes. You know what? Why not? Let's just do this instead. Just gaslight me in the comments about 5 and 6 PSP remakes being real for fun, because, why not? And like and sub while you're interested. I'm getting off track. I need to continue the review. Anyways, that's pretty much it for the graphics department here. So let's get into gameplay. Now, Final Fantasy IV is the beginning of a new era of Final Fantasy combat, as this was the game that ditched the original trilogy's turn-based combat in favor of the infamous ATB system. A mechanic so beloved, it became the basis of gameplay for the next 6 titles. So, what is ATB anyways? Well, it stands for Active Time Battle Systems, where instead of everyone waiting their turn to attack and beat the living daylights out of each other, it becomes your turn when the newly added ATB gauge fills up. But during that time, monsters can now attack you instead of just being passive. So it forces much more thought and tension into the mix. For example, you could be fighting a boss, and one of your party members is on his last leg. You have to think to yourself as fast as possible. Do you risk utilizing a Cura to heal them fast enough so they don't die? Or do you bite the bullet, let them die, mainly due to not being fast enough, and focus on healing or casting Protect on another party member so they are more prepared? I honestly adore this style of gameplay. It made battles so much more entertaining when I had to be constantly kept on my toes. I may have liked the NES trilogy's gameplay, but I do believe 4's gameplay blows it out of the water easily. It's honestly kind of disappointing thinking on it now, how most RPGs don't really utilize this combat. I feel like Ryza and to an extent the 7 remakes are the only ones I've seen use it. Of course, that isn't the only difference in terms of gameplay, as the job system was removed in this game in place of everyone having a set job style instead. A decision that I admit I wasn't super fond of after experiencing 3, but I got over it pretty quickly considering that A, this game introduces the Dark Knight class, one of my favorite classes ever, and 2, the game has a sort of rotating door style to its party management, so you never feel like you're too restricted on jobs to play with. And 3, I'll be real, they wouldn't have really been able to tell the story they wanted to if they didn't make these kinds of changes, so it was a much smarter move in my opinion. Speaking of story, how about we start talking about it and the characters? Now at this point, it's been stated time and time again how much of a game changer 4 was for storytelling in JRPGs, as it was one of the first, if not the first game, that chose to dive more into its characters, world, and story all at once. Things like the original trilogy tried this, well 2 and 3 did, but they were never really able to hit that narrative home run until they got to 4. The closest was 2 though, so props to 2 for that I guess. Give it some praise. The narrative was now much more than just finding the crystals to save the day. The world feels like it's more than just an area to explore, with the game focusing much more on its lore. And best of all, the cast actually feels like characters who not only grow and develop as the story continues on, but feel like they actually have relevance in the plot itself. It's such an amazing improvement in comparison to how 3 just had you there. So what even is the story about? Well, it follows Cecil, the leader of the castle's Red Wings, who has been second-guessing the orders he's been receiving from the king, as they become much more merciless as time has gone on, to the point that their most recent mission had them assault and kill a large amount of innocent civilians just to get their hands on a crystal. And when he shows distrust towards the king, they respond in anger and remove him from command of the Red Wings, and probably would have lost a lot more if his best buddy and certified cuck, Kane, had jumped in to earn us one last job offer, delivering the ring to Mystia. But before he leaves, he talks to his love interest Rosa, who he laments to about how much he regrets his actions to her. She kind of calls him a bitch, and then, after a little bit of back and forth, Kane and Cecil set out to deliver the ring. And once they do... What the fuck? Now this was devastating to watch unfold. We may have not known what the ring was capable of, sure, but the fact we brought it here and destroyed the town with it is all in our hands, especially when it leads to the death of Iridia's mother. This is a moment when Cecil decides to leave the kingdom behind, as he can no longer follow these horrid orders anymore. Kane agrees to help, but these plans are damaged by Iridia absolutely losing her shit and summoning Titan to destroy the area, which separates the two friends, leaving Cecil with only the unconscious child. And after swearing to protect her after fighting off some of his former comrades, the journey finally begins for Cecil to do battle with not only the darkness in his own home, but also his own heart. Along the way, meeting and befriending a large group of characters, from the grumpy old sage Telia, to the cowardly Prince Edward, and my personal favorite, the badass monk Yang. Each have several moments in the story to shine and even grow as people, which really complements this game's much darker tone. And while there are several great moments of Cecil traveling with his cast, and fighting alongside them in order to defeat his former home, and the new leader of the Red Wings, Golbez, after facing off with him though and losing pretty badly, especially with the revelation that Kane is now working for him, the son of a bitch, Cecil comes to a realization. If he wants to be Golbez, he must abandon the path of a Dark Knight, and embrace the role of a paladin to become a light to defeat the darkness. I love this moment. It really shows how much Cecil has grown as a person throughout this journey. He then moves forward and challenges Golbez's army. He's able to save Kane from Golbez's control, and then Kane explains Golbez's real goal is to get both the crystals and the dark crystals to make a path to the moon. Which, I gotta add, I like that the dark crystals are actually being used for this game, in comparison to 3 just kind of having them for the final area. You get to go to an all-new area, you meet Edge the ninja, fail to stop Golbez again, and then you go to the moon. You learn that Cecil is basically the son of a moon man and actually Golbez's brother. Yeah, I was not expecting moon people in this, to be honest. We'll also learn that there's an even bigger evil going on behind the scenes controlling Golbez, known as Zeromus, and team up with the guy whose name sounds like it's a shout for the Dragonborn in Skyrim, finally stop Golbez and get the evil knocked out of him. The evil goes to the final dungeon and you follow it and confront Zeromus. You get a cool scene of everybody cheering you on, and then you save the world, where afterwards, Cecil and Rosa get married, and everyone goes their separate ways. And that's the end. Yeah, I like the story a lot if you couldn't tell. It's well paced, well written, and uses the characters well, for the most parts. The story is great, but it's got some massive issues. So how about I start explaining those up next? Let's get to the cons of Final Fantasy IV. I sunk a lot of time talking about the pros of this game, especially in the story section. Mainly because I wanted everyone watching to know how much respect the story and characters of 4 get. Even with the flaws I'm about to tear into, I still respect and enjoy 4's story for how much it moved storytelling in this franchise forward. Which is why I need you to understand that Final Fantasy IV may have one of the worst handlings of the concept of death I have ever seen in pretty much my entire gaming history. And I genuinely mean that. The concept of death is one of the most sensitive topics when it comes to any sort of piece of media. If handled correctly, it can lead to some of the most emotionally gripping, insanely moving, and heart-wrenching moments in a game, movie, show, book, any of those. But what happens when the game doesn't get that, and just utilizes it for nothing but fake out deaths and cheap shock value? Well, you get Final Fantasy IV's handling of the situation. The sheer amount of times 4 shows a character seemingly die or sacrifice themselves, only for them to be completely fine like a while later, is jaw-dropping. And they pull this constantly. Several characters fall in the ocean? Nah, they're fine. Yang sacrifices himself to keep the party alive from a big explosion? Nope, he's all good. Sid strapping a bomb to his body and jumping off the airship to blow up the underworld entrance while giving the main villain Golbez a giant "fuck you" as a send-off? Okay, first off, that is metal as hell. Second off, he's fine. Damn, guess those literal explosives just ain't what they used to be, huh? Sure am glad that couple 1,000-meter fall also just left some slight bruises. Those aren't even the worst offenses though. The worst ones are when the game literally breaks its pre-established concepts in order to have nobody die.
And there is no better example of this than with Palom and Porom. See, after you defeat one of the 4 elemental lords that follow Golbez, he decides to pull one last trick on you and try to crush your entire party to death. So Palom and Porom come to a decision and stake their lives on it, placing all of their faith in Cecil by utilizing the break spell so they can turn into stone to save them. Telia tries to save them with the Ezina spell, but he cannot, because the rules state one clear fact: because you casted break on yourself, you cannot come back from it. Truly a heart-wrenching moment. It makes you truly wonder why these kids, these innocent children, had to pay such a... Never mind, they're okay. The Elder just healed them. I don't know what to say to this. Alright, so all that stuff about it, you literally fucking told me you couldn't come back. You can't just backstep on this. That's not how this works. You can't literally wave a fucking title card in my face saying they can't come back and then just bring them back for no reason other than, nah, we need a happy ending. That doesn't make any sense in a story standpoint. The only character that ever is like bound to any rule whatsoever in this game is Telia. And I'll be totally honest, I was expecting him to just come back at the end of the game. Since everyone else fucking can, this game just ignores logic, why doesn't Telia get to come back? Why doesn't he get a second chance, huh, game? What, are you just against him? Are you against his kind, the sages? Wow, I didn't know you were like that, game. That's pretty offensive. You can break the rules for everyone else, but not this guy, am I right? Who needs to worry about that kind of consequence? Am I right, folks?
Sorry for the long-ass tangent, but that has been bothering me the more I kept seeing it for this review. Thankfully, it seems like Square learned from their lessons, as I really can't think of any other Final Fantasy games I've played so far that pull this. Other than that, I don't have many other issues with the plot, so I'm going to move on to my complaints from gameplay. Now, I love 4's gameplay. In fact, I don't really think there's all that much I have to complain about. There are a few things though, so how about I bring those up? For one, I didn't really like the aspect of having to return to level 1 once I got the Paladin job. This is a more minor issue in comparison to the other gameplay problems I had, but man, having to just grind my way back up was kind of dumb. Thankfully, it goes fast, so again, like I said, it is a nitpick. The other, bigger gameplay issue I had was actually with the matter of ethers. Like Final Fantasy III, 4 doesn't exactly make it easy to get your hands on them. But while you can actually buy them in 4, they are only available in the final area of the game and are insanely overpriced. Like, 10,000 for 1 ether is just plain ridiculous, especially when the endgame has 4 out of 5 of your party members using MP for skills. So why did they do this? Well, my theory is that they wanted you to rely more on the ability to save and use tents and cottages in dungeons, similar to how 3 relied on the healing water and made you have a focus on hoarding elixirs. But the main difference here is 3 utilized the job system, where you could choose who did and didn't have MP. In 4, almost every party member in the endgame uses MP in some sort of way, so it kind of forces you to use magic more if you want to deal out the most damage. And as a result, you'll have to bankrupt yourself to pay for MP healers. It normally wouldn't be such an issue, but again, when over half your endgame party utilizes MP, and it costs this much just for 1 ether, it comes across as annoying and kind of short-sighted. Other than these 2 aspects, I don't have much else to complain about, so let's move on to the final thoughts. Final Fantasy IV was an absolutely phenomenal title. I loved this game as a child, and I love it even more now that I fully understand the story and its themes. However, it's far from perfect. Its frustrating handling of the concept of death and a few gameplay choices end up keeping me from giving it a perfect 10 out of 10. And that is why I think the best rating for this game is a solid 8.5 out of 10. Thank you all so much for watching and joining me on another one of these Final Fantasy reviews. These are a lot of fun to do, and I've been enjoying the hell out of this binge. If you want to continue following me on this binge, or just check out my other content, why not hit that like and subscribe button down below to join me on my RPG journey, and leave a comment down below if you have any questions or just want to chat with me. That's all, folks. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time for more RPG content.